TAPUR trial was started by ASCO, American Society of Clinical Oncology, and a lot of credit to them and the officers, the executives, and the members of ASCO for doing this. But it was needed, it was necessary. We were out there in a space where everybody was saying, I'm doing these genomic profiles, I'm getting targets that might work, I want to give my patient the medication, they don't have any other option. Why shouldn't I be able to give that medicine? And of course, technically there was nothing preventing them from giving the medication, but the fact is that the cost is very high, and unless you're on a clinical trial, the payers and Medicare won't pay for it. And in fact, even today, some of the payers will say, if you find a patient with a mutation and you go to the insurance company and you say, I want to use this medicine in this disease for this patient because they have a target, the payer says, we're not going to pay for it, and we're not only not going to pay for that, we're not going to pay for any administration costs if they find out about it. So it's pretty complex. So the TAPUR trial gives us the chance to take that technology, to take that science and apply it to patients in real time with everybody agreeing that they're going to have access to the medicine, that they're going to have payment for the treatments, and that the data is going to be available. You know, we live in an age where data should flow a lot more freely. That's a whole other topic. I'm not going to get into that today, but the reality is that the data is not flowing as freely as it should. In this situation, take the information, look at it carefully, know what you're looking for, and then let's see what we find out. And the phrase that's been used is called basket trials. So there have been basket trials that have been done, and we've learned, for example, that some drugs that might work in one disease, even with the mutation in a different disease, they don't work. But even in the disease where it didn't work, within a subset of patients, it worked. So we have learned from doing this. I think the real question is, how do we get more people involved? And not just the health professionals, not just the FDA. How do we get the community? How do we get consumers? How do we get caregivers to know that this is possible? How do we get the doctors to engage? How do we get the community level physicians? Let's not forget that a lot of patients with cancer are treated in the community, and we have to make it reasonable for that doctor to participate, and hopefully through TAPUR, hopefully through NCI Match, hopefully through other trials. I also want to mention it's not just in these targeted therapies, but also on the West Coast, and Dr. Laura Esserman, who's at the University of California, San Francisco, and I consider her a friend, and she's a very forward-thinking individual and recognized as such. She started adaptive trials, what's called adaptive trials, with I-SPY a number of years ago. And she brought the experts together, and it was in treatment in breast cancer. And without having to go through all the same, jump through all the hoops you had to do, they were able to change and move drugs in, move drugs out, and move things through the process faster. Let's not forget, it's not just the FDA well, it is maybe the FDA because it's the clinical trial structure. It's the institutional review board. It's getting people to participate. It's getting the docs to participate. It's getting the patients to participate. You know, all those pieces. If you have an ongoing trial mechanism, it makes life a lot easier and does accelerate the process. And we've seen that happen now with other medications, and it's certainly a trend that I think is in the right direction. But we have to make that happen, to make it really work. You know, the manufacturers, the pharma companies have to make the drug available, and somebody has to pay for the administration of that drug. And the insurers have to step up to the plate, the payers, and some do and some don't, and not make it difficult, but say, yes, we understand that as part, that may not be a formal clinical trial, but it's part of the learning process, and as long as there's some organization to it, we're willing to support that. It's sort of doing that research piece within the framework of a traditional insurance. And if we don't do that, we're going to have so many opportunities to advance medicine in the next, I mean, to me, it's incredible. If we don't figure out a way to move these medicines through this pipeline more quickly, we will all lose because potentially useful medicines won't become available to people who need them as quickly as possible. We need to do better when it comes to getting patients into clinical trials, period, end of statement writ large. You can't ask the question to somebody who has some expertise in this area without hearing only 3 to 5%, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less, depending on who gives the answer, of the patients who are eligible for clinical trials are put onto clinical trials. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that. Not every patient is treated at a major cancer center. Not every patient is treated at a large facility that has the resources to do clinical trials. There are a whole lot of people in this country that we have to remember are in community settings, some in modest towns, some in small towns, some in rural America, who also could benefit from getting into clinical trials. So we need to find mechanisms to be able to find those, to identify those patients, and to get them in the trial at the place where they live. Now, some will say, well, we don't have oversight. We don't need you. I've actually been in the room with folks from a major medical cancer center who said, we don't need those people from the community in our trials. We have more than enough in our own place. But even the major centers now have to band together. I mean, that's a good thing, to have enough patients to try some of these drugs. And there have been outreach efforts, and they have been successful. LungMap is an example of where they tried to go out and find these patients. They had an excellent response from community-based settings. It can be done. It needs to be done. If we're going to take patients and put them through genomic testing, and then we have a drug sitting over here that may match their somewhat unusual target, we need to get them together. And that means educating the patients and educating the professional staff. We have a long way to go, by the way. It's not just clinical trials. Understanding genomics, the National Human Genome Research Institute had a conference recently about a program called GLEE, G-L-E-E, talking about the need to educate communities, to educate health professionals, to start in elementary schools about genomic, teaching about the genes and what they do. So at least we have an informed community. And in the professional community, things are changing so quickly. The busy physician, the busy nurse, the busy health professional doesn't have a whole lot of time to learn everything every day. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. So we need to build the tools and the resources that make this thing work. Again, there's so much we don't know yet, and there's so much we're learning, and it's changing, if not daily, it changes quickly. If we don't educate folks and get information to them in a point of service, real-time basis, then we will have failed to take advantage of the opportunity to improve lives and maybe save lives.